Hi, I'm Samia McCulley, naturopathic doctor, and welcome to 10 Weeks to Total Wellness. This is our first live webinar. I'm very excited to have you join us. Many of you or several of you have already done the live class. We did it a couple days ago. And so now we're recording for anyone else who decides they want to join, or for people who who are already signed up but just can't join us today. They can watch this later. So what I'm going to be doing is, today we have not solved this problem yet. I have the slides all printed out. We're going to show them. I'll show them intermittently throughout to show you where we are. But what I've done is included the whole presentation as a post that you can download. You can put it on your computer, you can print it out and follow it that way. I've also added the handout so you can print that out as well. And what you can do, if you print it out, you can just watch me as I'm talking. If you want to look at it on your computer, just open the screen that has a presentation and you can move on as I move on. So I'm very excited for our 10 Weeks to Total Wellness because this has been about 1.5 years in the making. And the idea behind it has evolved a few times. This started out as me wanting to show people what a ketogenic diet could do for them. And then I realized, because I don't think it's practical to be in ketosis, and if you don't know what ketosis is now, you definitely will by the end of 10 weeks. We'll be going into ketosis starting on week 3. But what I wanted to do was have this be a course about the ketogenic diet, because it's what helps us open our fat stores and lose weight and have all kinds of other health improvements. So what I decided to do, and the first 2 weeks are going to be about blood sugar management, is to combine these things, because it's not practical for us to follow a very high fat diet all the time. We have Christmas or Hanukkah or New Year's or birthdays or Thanksgiving. And so we need to be able to be healthier more of the time and understand what's going on in our body, so we can just make different choices. We can eat at different times. We can eat different things maybe. It doesn't mean we have to miss out on everything at a traditional meal, but we might want to make some changes, and we can maybe add things to balance things out so that we don't feel horrible the next day, or so we don't gain as much weight. So anyway, let's flip to slide 1. So section 1, I've divided this 10-week course into 3 sections. Section 1 will be about managing blood sugar. It's going to be on weeks 1 and 2. And so my plan is to have you do things in incremental changes, because I don't think if we make huge changes all at once, it's really hard to stick with it. And it's not going to be a lasting change. My goal for you with this course is to be able to have it become kind of a way of life. And so you're educating yourself, learning a lot more about your body, and you can take it with you and use it. You can teach other people. If you think other people may be interested in this course, you can refer them to us too. Our second section is ketosis. So ketosis is a high-fat, being in ketosis is a high-fat, low-carbohydrate diet. And what happens when we are in this is it unlocks our fat cells, and it allows us to lose weight, among a whole bunch of other things. So that will be weeks 3 to 7. And in week 3, we'll be going into ketosis, taking our time to go into ketosis. And then weeks 4 to 7, we'll be spending in ketosis, experimenting. If things happen, we'll troubleshoot what happens. And I've left this course a little bit open so that we can adjust to the needs of people doing the course. If you have questions anytime during, if you're watching it live, you can ask questions that I may be able to answer during the class. And if you're watching it after the live version, you can ask questions during the week and I can answer them in the next webinar. Obviously, you know that you've been invited to be in a private Facebook group. Only you can see this and the other people who are signed up for the course. You're welcome to support each other, ask each other questions. Some people may find things easier than others. So that I like this kind of forum so that that's a possibility. And section 3, we're calling the balancing act. The balancing act is learning to be between ketosis and optimal blood balancing, or balancing your blood sugar, so that you can, instead of getting to January 1st and having resolutions and trying to lose weight because you couldn't control yourself over the holidays, is that we learn how to not need that anymore. Learn how to be in balance. Learn how to not set our bodies up for cravings and overeating and even over alcohol. If we're in balance, our bodies don't crave that stuff and we don't even want it. So that's the situation I want you to be able to put yourself in. So that I'll be showing you how to combine managing blood sugar, cyclical ketosis, and intermittent fasting. And that will be weeks 8 to 10. And then we have 2 weeks where there will be no webinar. That will be weeks 6 and 9. And week 3 will not be live. My sister's getting married. I thought that was a good excuse not to do a live one. I'm going to pre-record it and we'll release it on the Friday at 6 o'clock. And but other than that, the rest of them will be live. I'll be posting all the dates by the end of the day, dates and times. And the reason for having varied dates and times, or days and times during the week, is so that everyone gets a chance to do it live. Sometimes, if we have a meeting every Tuesday at 7 o'clock, we don't want to miss it every time. So that's the reason for the variability. So I think I've just covered slide 2, and now we're going to flip to slide 3. So part 1, multi-meals for weight loss and better health. So we're going to move down to managing blood sugar 101, and I'm going to talk about sugar. Sugar, the preferred fuel. So sugar is what we burn to make energy. Fat is another thing we can use to burn energy or to make energy. So there are 2 options at any given time. We can be burning sugar or we can be burning fat. And I can tell from just looking out around where I live, where you live, you can probably see that most people are not burning fat, they're burning sugar. And as we get older and our hormones change, that sugar turns more and more into fat. We see beer bellies in men, we see women looking pregnant when they're 55 or 60. And I think most people have become quite frustrated and perplexed and even kind of just give up because it seems so impossible to lose that weight. So while this class is about weight loss is one of the major things I think many people struggle with, this will be impacting your whole health in all kinds of different ways. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. So I want to give you an example. If you have a wallet, you have $3,000 in your wallet, and you have a bank account, and you have $60,000 in your bank account. If you keep spending the money in your wallet, but I keep giving you money to replenish the money that you've spent, you're never going to have to go to the bank. So if sugar is the money in your wallet and fat is the money in your bank account, you can see how if you keep replenishing the sugar over and over, you never get to dip into the fat stores. The only way for that to happen is for you to drain your body of enough sugar so that it has no choice but to burn fat. At any given time, our bodies have between 2,000 and 3,000 calories worth of sugar to burn. And at any given time, our bodies have 50 to 60,000 calories of fat to burn. So you can see how if you were in sugar burning mode, you have to keep replenishing that. Otherwise, you have problems. And it's not a smooth road when you first go into ketosis. If you don't know what you're doing, you don't just slide there and feel fine. You go there in a bumpy fashion, and the more insulin resistant you are, the more difficult and the longer it takes. Although I have some tricks to help try and prevent the switch. Sometimes for some people it can take a couple days to get into ketosis, and I've had patients that it's taken up to 3 months to get into ketosis. And then once I give them the little tricks, it actually only ends up taking a couple days to get there. So when we limit our carbohydrates, we're able to switch over into fat burning mode. So the reason I decided to do blood sugar balancing this time is because there are other ways to lose weight than by just opening your fat stores. You can also lose weight by managing your blood sugar really well. I'll give you an example. This is just one patient that I'm picking as an example. They were diabetic. I put them on, gave them the suggestions that I'm giving you today for balancing blood sugar. And within 3 months, and this person had had an impossible time losing weight, within 3 months, they'd lost 35 pounds. And that was just by changing the times that they were eating. It had nothing to do with what they were eating, because one of the bedtime snacks was actually cereal and milk, which I don't recommend typically. So it can be incredibly powerful just by changing a few things. So next slide, you can switch either your papers that you're holding in your hands, or you can switch forward it in your computer. So blood sugar management is a balance between hormones and neurotransmitters. When our blood sugar isn't balanced, we have many problems. We have an increase in fat stores. We have difficulty losing weight. We have insomnia. We have infertility. Infertility looks like PCOS or polycystic ovarian syndrome. And that comes from insulin resistance, and it has an impact on your hormones. And even for men, when your blood sugar is out of balance, when men start to grow man boobs, is the only term I can think for them right now, that is because you have a blood sugar imbalance. And so the estrogen that men have increase, and you end up growing tissue in your breasts. Fatigue, very common, suppressed immune system, and inflammation. And inflammation is the cause of chronic disease. And so if blood sugar imbalance causes inflammation and high blood sugar causes inflammation, then we have all kinds of problems stemming from this. And there are lots of other things that contribute to inflammation, like food sensitivities, which we'll be discussing next week. We can have infections that cause inflammation. We can have chemicals in our environment that cause inflammation. We can have, for example, exhaust fumes from cars or trucks. We can have chemicals in our homes or offices where things are off-gassing. Our body doesn't know how to process them, so they cause inflammation. We can have molds. We can have personal care products, like our makeup and our shampoo and our soap. We can have household cleaning products. All of those things contain chemicals, and those are important places to look for sources of inflammation. But the biggest thing here that we have control over is what we put in our mouth, and in turn, how we control our blood sugar. So what I think is kind of funny, here's our next slide. Sorry, this is backwards, so it's confusing where I'm putting this sheet. To compensate for blood sugar or for imbalance, we have developed cultural phenomenons that have happened for, I don't know how long afternoon tea has been around, but afternoon tea is one of them. It's because we fall asleep in the afternoon, and the reason is because of a blood sugar dysregulation. We take afternoon naps. We have sleep aids. We have billions of dollars invested in creating sleep aids. People spend, I don't know how much money trying to get better sleep, fall asleep, stay asleep. And then we have drugs to relieve anxiety. Anxiety, if you look up anxiety or a panic attack and hypoglycemia, which is low blood sugar, on Wikipedia, and compare the symptoms of both, you will see that a panic attack and a hypoglycemic episode are almost one and the same. And that is because we've all heard of serotonin. Serotonin is associated with depression. GABA is associated with anxiety. So GABA is made from sugar. And sugar, if it's too low, we can't make GABA. So I always liken this to, if you remember the ads, this was probably 20 years ago, about Calgon, that was the bubble bath. And so I always tell my patients, if you are in the middle of New York City, it's 100 degrees out, it's humid, cars are honking, you have lights shining everywhere, flashing everywhere, you have tons of people, it's very stressful. It's not very calming. So there's lots of stimulation coming in that makes you not feel great. So if you jump in a bath, if you could teleport yourself to a Calgon bath somewhere, all of a sudden all that stimulation goes away and you feel relaxed. So if you feel relaxed, what is happening is GABA is getting plugged in to your receptors, and it calms you down. If you don't have enough sugar in your blood, you can't make enough GABA, that stimulation, whether it's actually physically there or not, feels like it's there, and you have anxiety. So managing your blood sugar is incredibly important for managing anxiety, or for eliminating anxiety for that matter. So next, we have factors that influence blood sugar balance. So I've got 4 things here. So we have the top 3 are hormones. We have insulin, cortisol, glucagon, and the bottom one is food. So cortisol has its own jobs. Here's our next slide. It's responsible for keeping blood sugar balanced from dinner to breakfast. And I put a hyphen there because you're breaking a fast. So if you've ever heard of adrenal fatigue, some people have been pushing themselves and pushing themselves and pushing themselves so that they aren't able to make enough cortisol to handle their life. Cortisol is a stress hormone, and it's made in our adrenal glands. Our adrenal glands are 2 fatty glands that sit on top of the kidneys. And one of the jobs of cortisol in the middle of the night, as our blood sugar starts to dip because we are fasting, because obviously food provides us with sugar, so food can keep us stable throughout the day. You keep giving, keep giving, keep giving. If there is no sugar, we start dropping. There is a mechanism that is supposed to be able to prevent this from happening, the dropping part. And what happens is our adrenals release cortisol, and cortisol naturally rises throughout the night. So the more cortisol that's present, the more it tells the liver to break down glycogen. Glycogen is sugar bound together. So if it breaks down glycogen and can let sugar into the bloodstream to keep it stable, to keep it from dropping. So if we don't have enough cortisol, it doesn't give the liver that message. And if the liver doesn't get that message, the blood sugar drops to a point where it's too low. It's biologically not stable. You've gone out of homeostasis. And so you have to have a correction mechanism for that when something fails. And what happens is our body puts out epinephrine, or the common term for that is adrenaline. And adrenaline obviously you're not going to feel very tired when that happens. So if adrenaline starts pumping through your veins, you're going to wake up. And then as a response, eventually you will dump a bunch of blood sugar into your bloodstream. And so what happens in those situations is you end up with a much higher fasting blood sugar because that has happened in the night. And if your blood sugar had been balanced and the blood sugar didn't drop too low during the night, then you'd have your blood sugar would slowly go down, but it never gets to the point where you're in the danger zone. So then in the morning, you have the lowered fasting blood sugar. So cortisol, that's one thing that cortisol does. When we have high stress, we have high cortisol levels, and then our blood sugar gets too high. What happens when we have these situations? So there's two phenomena that happen here. We have high cortisol, we have low cortisol. High cortisol, I liken to the investment banker who works 16 hours a day. He eats dinner at 11 o'clock, maybe goes out drinking to the clubs, gets in bed at 3 o'clock or 4, 5 o'clock, whatever it is, has a few hours sleep, gets up and does it all over again. So this obviously is not a healthy situation, but he's putting out a lot of cortisol. And so why does he feel able to eat dinner at 11 o'clock at night? Well, because his cortisol is so high and it's stimulating a release of blood sugar. And when you have a lot of blood sugar in your bloodstream, it's difficult to sleep. So this guy is going to fall asleep right after lunch, and he's also going to have difficulty falling asleep at night. So then he just wants to stay up. And if that's you, like lots of people like to call it a night owl. They say, oh, I'm a night owl. You're a night owl because your hormones are not balanced. And so if we can balance your hormones, you will no longer be a night owl. When we are chronically stressed, and the first example I gave of waking up in the middle of the night is more from the chronically stressed person. And you'd be surprised at how young you can be for that to actually have a really negative impact on you. I think our society, when I was in college, my professor, one of my professors, actually it was a naturopathic school, that would make more sense. He said, do you realize that in 1 year, we are exposed to more stimuli than a person 100 years ago was exposed to in their entire lifetime? And so if you think about that, we have phones, we have computers, we have TVs, we have, just stressful situations where we're not getting enough help taking care of our kids. We have financial obligations. We have all kinds of things that people didn't have to worry about. And maybe they did worry about them before, but there's all these new things that have come into play. I mean, how many times we look at our phones? Maybe 100 times a day, I don't know, depending on the person. And so that can cause chronic stress that could build up to be a big problem by the time you're 20 years old nowadays. And that probably would not have happened till maybe you're 60 or 70 or 80 before. So this is the investment banker whose problems turn into the crashing rather than the stimulation, maybe after 5 or 6 years of working. So now we have the chronically stressed person. They have low cortisol, so their blood sugar drops, and that's the example of the middle of the night. The other problem this person experiences is falling asleep in the later afternoon, like 3 or 4 o'clock. So there you have fatigue and insomnia for both high blood sugar and low blood sugar, both a problem and both easily remedied by the way we eat. So we have insulin was our next hormone. Insulin. What is insulin? Wow. So insulin is a key that allows our cells to open to let sugar in to make energy. Insulin is also a fat storage hormone. So insulin is necessary, but it can become a big problem for us. Insulin resistance, which I'm sure you've heard that term before, is when the key doesn't work very well. As a result, our pancreas pumps out more and more insulin to fix the problem. And then we end up getting high insulin levels. We get infertility. We get other hormonal changes. And things that can cause insulin resistance are poor diet, like the standard American diet. High stress can cause insulin resistance. Lack of sleep increases our insulin resistance. Lack of exercise increases our insulin resistance. So there are many things that can cause insulin resistance, and the reason it's a problem is because our pancreas ends up pumping out more and more insulin to compensate for the sugar that's not going into the cells. And what happens when we have insulin resistance, if we can't get sugar in to make energy, then we're tired. And insulin, because it's a fat storage hormone, it can make our fat cells replicate, and it can also make our fat cells increase in size. So not something any of us really want. Third hormone, I'm just going to briefly touch on this, is glucagon. Glucagon is released when blood sugar drops, and it signals our liver to break down glycogen and let it into the bloodstream. So glucagon and insulin are both released from the pancreas, and they have opposing jobs, basically. Why is food so important? This was the fourth one at the bottom of those, that little circle that I showed you. This is Hippocrates, or at least our image of him. 2,500 years ago, he said, "Let food be our medicine, and medicine be our food." So why do we find it so strange that food can help us now? I think most of us have woken up to that fact, but there is so much controversy about what the right thing is to do. And I guess this is where I will talk about ketosis. So one of the things that was popularized in the 80s and 90s, I believe, I never did it, so I actually don't remember when exactly it was popular, but the Atkins diet. So the Atkins diet is high protein, very low carbohydrate. And I'm not sure about the fat intake of Atkins, but one thing I do know is that the diet by most people was misinterpreted. People did lose a lot of weight on it. But in the end, I think it was harder to follow because people got constipated and had other problems. But he was definitely onto something. So ketosis is a word we learn in medical school, and you hear it with the term diabetes. So diabetic ketosis is not a good thing. It's because blood sugar has been so screwed up that you're generating ketones and trying to survive on that, which is in that situation, the ketones are incredibly high, like 25 or 26. When we're in a ketogenic diet, meaning we're burning fat, our ketone level is between 1.5 and 3. So there's a very, very big difference between 1.5 and 3 and 25 or 26. So Gandhi fasted for 40 days when this whole thing was happening about this letting India go from the British, and he survived for 40 days with no food. And how is that? He was in ketosis. So ketosis can also happen when you just fast. You don't have anything to eat. He was in starvation mode, which is not what our goal will be to be in ketosis. It will be to open up our fat cells so that we can burn fat and have other things balanced. But food, if we think about historically what is natural to human beings, we have times of feast and we have times of famine. So what do you think happens during times of famine, where maybe you can get a few berries during the day, or whatever other things that people may have foraged for? in these situations, people would have been in ketosis. Another interesting thing is that kids go into ketosis much more easily and quicker than adults do. And they also say that breast milk has ketones in it. So babies are able to, they burn fat. And that's what happens when they're, you know, say maybe they don't eat for a while when they're first born. They're not getting any calories, but they're fine. It's because they're burning ketones. Or their bodies can go into ketosis very easily and quickly. So during times of feast, we would be able to have plenty of food, and our body will burn that first. And it makes sense. If you have fat, you want to be able to store it and dip into it when you really need it, when there's no food around. So if we were burning fat when there was all the food around, we would be getting ourselves into a problem. So the sugar is always the preferred, and we will always burn sugar first unless there's nothing around. So food can fix all kinds of things if we know the right quantities, the right things to choose, and the right times to eat. And we can mimic what humans naturally experienced and have experienced for hundreds of thousands of years. And I've had more than one person ask me, oh, don't you think the ketogenic is just the new fad diet? And I actually don't. I think maybe we found the thing that is what our problem is that we've been trying to do things that are not natural to our systems, and they just don't work. And I'll just go on a little tangent here about saturated fat. There was a guy named Ansel Keys in the 50s who made a study called the 6-country study. And the 6-country study, before he published it, was called the 21-country study. His theory was that saturated fat, or what his 6 countries ended up showing, was that saturated fat was linked to heart disease in some way. And so one of the presidents around that time had a heart attack. And so the Surgeon General decided to make a recommendation to Americans that they avoid saturated fat based on that study, when 16 of the countries that didn't show that were thrown out of the study. So you can imagine how inaccurate the science was there. And we have been going off of this study for over 50 years, and it's wreaked havoc on our health. And I think it's time for it to change. So this is my attempt at helping you change your way of thinking and change your health. So we can use food to influence all of these hormones that we've already talked about. So cortisol, insulin, and glucagon. So again, I will reiterate, the simplest way to impact every health condition is to change the way you eat. So taking out certain things, adding certain things, and changing the times that you eat will have an enormous impact. I have a list that I give to my patients when they have food sensitivities. And I tell them that if you have any symptom, literally any symptom under the sun, it could be a headache, it could be a pain in your toe, it could be a stomach cramping, or diarrhea, or gas, or bloating, or back pain, or tingly skin, or itchy face, or literally anything, weight gain, emotions, anxiety, depression. All of those things can be impacted by the things you eat. And so changing your diet can literally change your life. And that's what I'd like for you in this. So here's our last slide here that I have for you. I'm going to give you some very basic instructions for this week. You may think that sounds like not much, but it can have a big impact. And so Next week, we'll be talking about food sensitivities a little bit. We'll be changing the way, removing some of the things from your diet. I'm going to give a few suggestions for fat, for increased fat in your meals, and I'll explain that in a minute. So one thing that is incredibly important is for you to eat within 30 minutes of waking up. So if you've ever had this feeling where in the morning, and this can happen at various times of the day. This could happen when you, could happen in the middle of the day before you have lunch. You get this sensation that something just isn't right. It's almost like a stress feeling. It's like a heightening of tension in your body, discomfort. It's not like it smacks you on the head, but it doesn't feel right. And then all of a sudden, it's like a switch goes off and that feeling goes away. So what has happened is your blood sugar has dropped too low. Your body, the alarm bells go off in your body, and then you release glycogen from your liver and your blood sugar levels are restored. So what happens when that happens? You get an insulin surge. Later on in the day, you'll get an insulin surge in the morning to correct the slew of sugar that was just dumped into your system. And insulin surges, again, cause hormonal problems. They cause sleep issues. They cause energy issues. They cause all kinds of things, and one of which is inflammation, which we know is the cause of all chronic disease. So by eating within 30 minutes of waking up, you will be preventing that dump from happening. You'll also be helping to prevent a dump that can happen later on in the afternoon, and partially to help prevent that fatigue that happens from 3 to 4 o'clock in the afternoon for some of us. The next thing I'll ask you to do is to eat every 2 to 2.5 hours throughout the day. This is from the time you wake up. So if you've eaten, you wake up at 7, you eat breakfast at 7:30, you're going to eat again by 10 o'clock. You're going to eat again by 12:30. You're going to eat again by 4 o'clock. Doesn't mean you have to have a million huge meals. You know, we've all heard this, eat 5 times a day and, you know, you'll be healthier. There is truth to that. And the reason is because we're trying to stop our blood sugar from dropping too low. And by doing that, we stop the insulin surge and we stop all kinds of other problems from happening. So in my mind, I hate being told what to do. So if I understand something, I will do it. And that's why I'm explaining all of this in such detail to you. So every 2 to 2.5 hours, another caveat I will add to that is that your lunch should be eaten probably between 10 and 11 in the morning if you're having blood sugar issues. If your blood sugar is too high, if your blood sugar is too low, this is helpful. And I will tell you that probably 95% of the people who walk into my office have some kind of blood sugar dysregulation. So we're not getting into specifically what you should eat this week, but I want you to get used to the times, eating more frequently, and trying to balance your blood sugar on your own. And then we'll get into taking some of the foods away. So you may see a slight drop in your weight this week. If you don't, that's okay. I also think a great idea is for you, and I'll put a log up so that you can record this for yourself since we're not in person, is to weigh yourself once a week and to measure your fat once a week. We actually have fat scales or fat monitors that, actually I have this one behind me. If you're interested, we can get one of these for you. You can just let us know. You can ask on the Facebook group. And included, if you've already started, you know by now that you have a scale. The food scale we'll be using starting week 3. And it won't be something you have to use for the rest of your life, don't worry. So eating your lunch earlier, that is the one thing that I have found has really stopped the afternoon slump with patients. So sometimes when we do all these changes, we have so much insulin resistance, we have such blood sugar problems that we do need supplements to help finish the rest of the problem that we're trying to solve. And for some people that is necessary. And if you think you might be one of those people, if this is not working for you in the first 2 weeks, if you don't see any change in your weight, that's where getting blood work comes in. And we also have an offer for people to do a very extensive blood panel, and then have 2 smaller consultations with me so that I can recommend supplements in addition to all these food changes you're making. That's totally up to you. If you're interested in that, please let us know. So we have eating within 30 minutes of waking up. Number 2 is eating every 2 to 2.5 hours throughout the day, including up until bedtime. And now you may see, so if your cortisol is deficient and it can't help sustain you through the night, if you eat right before you go to bed, the sugar that can be broken down by your meal probably will be able to sustain you through the middle of the night. You'll wake up less, or maybe you won't wake up at all. And if you do wake up in the middle of the night, have a little snack, because that gush of sugar that explodes into your system that makes it hard for you to fall back asleep hasn't happened right when you wake up. It's just the adrenaline from the low blood sugar that's happened. If you run to the kitchen or maybe leave a snack on your bedside table, you eat it right away, you'll stop that from happening, and then you can just go right back to sleep. So that's a solution that it would be nice if you didn't have to use, but it's incredibly helpful both for sleeping and also for your body. It puts less stress on your body when your blood sugar isn't all over the place. So we have that. We have our 30 minutes. We have our 2 to 2.5 hours. And number 3 is eating lunch between 10 and 11 in the morning. And so you can experiment around about how much you need to change that, how early you need to bring it. But what you should notice is that you don't have that afternoon fatigue, and you don't need that coffee or the biscuit or whatever it is that you're going to have. And most of the time, your cravings, they're actually coming from a blood sugar imbalance, either that or an infection. So cravings are I don't like to say that you should manage your cravings. I like to say you should give your body what it needs, and the cravings won't be there, because the cravings are created from physiological need. And if you're not getting what you need, your body gives you signals to try and get what it wants. Problem is, we have not very healthy responses because we don't know what's going on. So that is the third thing. And then I'll also say is that when you're hungry, lean to fat. Actually, I think I'm missing a slide here. I am missing a slide, but I'll just tell you. Lean to fat for a snack. Lean to fat in your meals. Always add fat to your meals. Like if you're having a salad at lunch, add a couple of tablespoons of olive oil. If you're having a snack in the middle of the day, have some nut butter and celery, or have some guacamole and cucumbers, or have some nuts and seeds. And when you say a handful of nuts and seeds, it means what can fit in the palm of your hand, not like this. Because too many nuts will definitely make you fat. So those are snack ideas. I have given on this slide here coconut oil, coconut butter, avocado, nuts and seeds, eggs, meat and fish. And when we choose meat and fish, meat should always be pasture raised, pasture finished, meaning that it's only ever eaten grass. There's an incredibly big difference between beef that you get in a conventional conventional grocery store and meat you can get from a farm where they're not raising that many animals. They're taking good care of them. They have a very different fat profile in them. It's much more omega-3 fatty acids that they have, and less saturated fat, although saturated fat is not bad for you. And and animal saturated fat is not bad for you. That's a misnomer and something that our society is slowly changing. One of the things, a big thing that just recently happened, actually I think it was in 2015, but I think most people don't know this, is that the dietary recommendations in the United States no longer recommend against having cholesterol in our diet. In fact, every single sex hormone is made from cholesterol. That's the backbone of them. And if we deprive ourselves too much of that, we have low libido. We have problems with our other problems with our hormones. We can't make enough hormones. Cholesterol is also the lining to every single cell in our body. So we need it. It's important. And another thing I'll add about cholesterol is that cholesterol is actually a response to blood sugar that's improperly balanced, meaning that when we have too much sugar, the first thing that happens is that it's turned into triglycerides. And then when that is kind of overburdened, the triglycerides, it shows up as higher LDLs. And then lower HDL. So LDL is what we think of as the bad cholesterol, and HDLs are the good cholesterol. And I would say neither of them are good or bad. They become a problem when they're oxidized. So when we eat certain things like trans fats or other things that cause inflammation or damage, that's when the cholesterol becomes a problem. Cholesterol in and of itself is not a problem. But when it's too high, it's typically a response of blood sugar. There are some genetic issues, and some people just have genetically high cholesterol, but for the most part, that's not the case. So the last thing, and the last slide, and if it's not in what I've included here, I will make sure that it is properly. Will repost the presentation. Is that 4 grams of sugar is equal to 1 teaspoon. So what I want you to do is start looking at all the things that you have in your fridge, in your cupboards. When you go grocery shopping, look before you buy. So I could buy a container of almond milk from Safeway, and the label looks the same. There's one little word that's different. One says unsweetened and one says nothing. And if I look at the nutrition facts, it'll say 0 grams of sugar on the unsweetened. And on the other one, it says 10 grams of sugar. So 10 grams of sugar, now that you know 4 grams is equal to a teaspoon, you can calculate it. And you know that 2.5 teaspoons of sugar will be in your milk, in a cup of your milk. Another example is, so we have sweetened yogurt or fruit yogurt. Fruit yogurt typically has about 19 grams of sugar, which is close to 5 teaspoons of sugar. And I don't know you, but I would never put that much sugar into my yogurt if I had plain yogurt. And I would never put that much sugar into a drink. Just learning to pay attention to labels will make a huge difference in your life. And I'm not asking you to restrict sugar, because I know people don't like to be told what to do. So be observant, and you can decide how you want to choose to go with that. So that's the last recommendation I'm making for this week, is just start paying attention to how much sugar is in what you're eating. And then you're eating more frequently. So I hope that was helpful. If you have questions, please post them in the next week, and I'll answer them next week. Other than that, I hope you have a great day, and I will see you soon.